309 players, 206 men and 103 women are here for the 2023 FIDE World Cup. It's the premier knockout tournament in over-the-board chess. All of these players have one goal: to become a candidate for the World Championship. Only 3 players in each tournament will earn this distinction. The winners will also earn a combined 160 grand in US dollars. Not bad. The top remaining seeds in 2023 are Magnus Carlsen and Aleksandra Goryachkina. Neither of them have won a World Cup before. Yes, even Magnus has yet to make it past the semis. It's that tough of a tournament. Still, Carlsen is the favorite in pretty much any tournament he plays. But don't sleep on the rest of this field. Caruana, Pragg, they're all here to try and win their first World Cup. For its part, the women's field also boasts some of the strongest players in the world. Who will take the throne this year? In a knockout like this, it is truly anyone's game. Who will come out on top? Who else will qualify for the candidates? What upsets are in store? This is the 2023 FIDE World Cup.
"309 of the world's best male and female chess players landed in Baku 3 weeks ago for their World Cup campaign. Only 8 remain in competition. In just a few moments from now, they will step into center stage to start the semi-finals action of the FIDE World Cup and the finals action of the FIDE Women World Cup. And we also have a house full in the beautiful playing hall of the Marriott Boulevard in Baku, Azerbaijan. It's going to be a fantastic day of chess. Today is game 1 of this big round, and I'm your host, International Master Tanya Sachdev. Alongside me, my good friend, Ginger GM, Simon Williams. Simon, I'm super hyped, especially after seeing that big crowd that we have today for the World Cup. How excited are you for this one?
Very excited, Tanya, and thank you for the lovely introduction. It's lovely to commentate alongside you, as always. And yeah, very impressive turnout there for this final. I mean, they got their local player, obviously Abasov, in the mix, and obviously very exciting pairings all round. But we're expecting a very good day of commentary. Fun games.
Super fun games. Nijat Abasov will definitely be feeling the home ground advantage with all those people there rooting and supporting for him. But the other side of that coin could be the high pressure that he might feel because of the same reasons. We're going to have some fantastic chess. Let's take a look at the bracket the players have, the paths that the players have taken to get where they are. And the standout performance in the FIDE Women World Cup has been Nurgul Salimova. She has had the tournament of her life, knocking out Anna Muzychuk in the semifinals, as well as Polina Shuvalova along the way. Nurgul Salimova had her breakout moment when she finished second in the national championship of her country, playing in the open section, overtaking many grandmasters there. She's all of 20 years old. She's an international master, booked her spot into the candidates. What a run and what fantastic play by Salimova in this one, Simon.
Yeah, she's been absolutely fantastic. And it's lovely to have these fairy tale kind of stories, because I don't think really anyone expected Salimova to go this far. Let's be honest, there's so many big names. And it's just great to see someone, an international master, only an international master, come all the way through and guarantee herself a place in what is what dream for everyone, the candidates competition. So it has been a fairy tale story, Tanya. And do you know who she's coached by as well? Just mentioning a big name there.
Simon, you're dropping a big name there, at least a super big name in this World Cup. And what a run he's had. That has been the breaking news. It's been the coach and his prodigy who find themselves in these final stages with the finish line inside at the FIDE World Cup. It is none other than a grandmaster, Nijat Abasov. He's the 69th seed. He makes it through to the semifinals after taking down some big names, including Anish Giri, Peter Swidler, Laurent Fressinet, and Vidit Gujarati. He will be playing against Magnus Carlsen. And it's true, as was confirmed, that he is in fact the coach of Salimova. So some brilliant performances there by these two. And what we're seeing in this matchup between Magnus and Najat is, Simon, the biggest rating disparity in the FIDE World Cup semi-final history. It's the top seed, world number 1 Magnus Carlsen, taking on 69th seed Najat Abasov.
That's crazy, isn't it? I mean, this is another fairy tale story. And I love these stories with the underdog coming through. And Abasov has also pretty much guaranteed himself a place in the candidates, which is a dream. That's your chance of becoming world champion, of breaking through to the elite. I say pretty much because the only reason it could go wrong is if Magnus Carlsen changes his mind and suddenly decides to play in the candidates, which he said he's not going to do. I think he probably won't do that. So all the players have got their place now in the candidates. But again, a fairy tale story. And what better way to crown it than to play the best player, Magnus Carlsen, Tanya? I mean, this is going to be a really fun match for him.
Super fun match, super big match. But as you mentioned, for the players, it's all about finalizing that spot. And even though Magnus did say that they can consider themselves and their spot confirmed, but technically there's still a chance things might change. And whoever does make it through in the semifinals round will be guaranteed a spot in that candidate. And there we see our FIDE Women World Cup board. And we've got Goryachkina, who will be taking on Salimova to fight for the crown. Goryachkina was also the finalist in the 2021 Sochi FIDE Women World Cup, where she lost to Aleksandra Goryachkina. So she is really looking for that title and the fight for the very important third place. Anna Muzichik ready to go. She will be facing Tanzangi. And fun fact, Simon, this also is a rematch from the semifinals of the 2021 FIDE Women World Cup.
It is, yeah. They're facing off again, and it's a really big match. I think this one, Tanya, because they are playing for that spot, if I get this right, in the candidates. But because it's the third, fourth spot competition, and there's only a couple of places for the females in the candidates, so it's a really big, important match. And I think the last year, am I right in saying that Anna, who's sitting there at the moment, she lost that match, so she's probably looking for revenge this time around?
Not only for that match, but the 2017 World Championship match also between Tanzangi and Anna Muzichik, which Tanzangi actually beat Anna and became the Women World Champion in this very knockout format of the FIDE World Cup. So a lot of history between these two players. Definitely a grudge match, a bit of a grudge match there, but a very important fight for that third place into the candidates, the 2024 candidates. And we see our other semi-finalist has arrived. World number 2, Fabiano Caruana, takes off his jacket. And what form he's been on. Just a fantastic play by Fabi. He's eliminated some of the biggest names in the chess world, including Jan Krzysztof Duda and Lenia Dominguez, the only player to be undefeated so far in the FIDE World Cup.
Very impressive, Tanya. I mean, in general, I've been so impressed by Fabiano's play over the last year. I think he's had another resurgence of strength. I feel that's probably because Magnus Carlsen has sort of stopped playing or saying he's going to play for the World Championships. And maybe Fabiano thinks, well, hang on a minute, I've got a chance of being world champion again. He just seems to be playing great chess all round. And as you mentioned there, he's the only player not to have lost a game so far. So in incredible form there. But we can see his opponent sitting down there. And, well, what can we say about the young Pragg, Tanya? What a player he is.
What a player, and what a quarterfinal win he had over Arjun. That match went down to the wire. And for all these three players, Abasov, Fabi, and Pragg, they make their debut into the semifinals. They've never reached this far off the stage. And it just means the world to Praggnanandhaa, all of 18, turned 18 during the World Cup. And he's facing Fabi. He mentioned in the interview that he wants to confirm that spot into the candidates. And that would mean he'd need to win this match against Fabi or fight for the third place. And we see the players are ready to go. The cameras are on. I think this is the first time that we're seeing such a massive crowd in the playing hall. And it's undoubtedly all for this man in front of you. And I'm not talking about the world number one.
Yeah, and there he is, Magnus Carlsen, and his opponent, of course, Abasov. So this match is the local player, so the crowds are out for him, but against Magnus Carlsen, the world's best player. And I think this is going to be a really interesting match. I mean, Magnus really wants to win this competition. It's the only competition pretty much that he hasn't won. So he's really, really hungry from it. He's got that champion's attitude, and they're going to start playing there. I wonder what Magnus will do. I thought he was going to move his knight there. That was a bit of a shocking idea. But this is going to be a great match. And because Abasov is playing such great chess as well. And we did mention Pragg a second ago, and I think it's maybe worth pointing out that if Pragg does get this place in the candidates, which looks nearly guaranteed, he's going to be the third youngest player in history behind Bobby Fischer and Magnus Carlsen to play in the candidates. So it's quite an achievement, that, Tanya. But we have some moves on the board here.
That would be huge. And for Indian chess as well, he would be the second Indian ever to make it to the candidates after Vishy Anand. So definitely a big moment here for Indian chess fans and for Pragg. And I'm looking at what we're seeing in front of us. Now, for Magnus, this is an everyday scene. He's got a crowd watching him, photographers around him. But for Abasov, this could be something very well of a novelty. And I wonder if he's feeling the pressure right now, the expectations that the home ground crowd has on him, or is this huge motivation for him?
Yeah, I mean, he's only got all the nation watching him. He's playing the best player ever, maybe, in chess. He's potentially playing for a candidate's place, only playing for a ton of money. No pressure at all, Tanya, on him. I mean, I think the right attitude, and we're seeing the opening follow something we've seen before here, but I think the right attitude is just to enjoy it. I mean, he's done so well. He's probably got the place in the candidate. So his attitude should be, whatever happens, just enjoy the opportunity to play against Magnus, because you're going to play better chess there as well. And we do see a Sicilian on the board. And one of the things I really like about Abasov's play is that he generally plays the Sicilian in nearly all of his games, Tanya.
And that's a really big point that you make, that for Abasov, half the pressure is gone, knowing that he's pretty much confirmed his spot into the candidates. And now it is just about enjoying the moment. He's playing against Magnus. And what a fantastic, regardless of how this match goes, just what a dream run, a tournament of a lifetime this has been for Abasov. And look at that, a position that you don't get to see out of the opening too often, a pawn structure that visually looks quite horrendous to my eyes, Simon, with black having two double pawns, a set of double pawns on the C line and the E line. I'm going to admit it, I'm not too familiar with these structures for black. And if I did not know the theory here, I would think that black should be worse out of the opening getting this kind of a pawn structure.
Yeah, I mean, let's just have a look at the position on the board. I mean, they look ugly, don't they? As you say, I mean, playing a pawn structure like this against one of the best positional players, against a player who loves picking up on the smallest of structural issues, is very, very risky. And I think the way that Magnus has played this, if we just go back a couple of moves, we have this bishop b5 Sicilian. This e6 move is one of the most common moves. Magnus now doubles black's pawn, so creating the first weakness. And now after this move d6, which is not the only move, Magnus plays e5. And I think this is an idea that maybe Jordan van Forest has played quite recently as well. And after pawn takes e5, you have to be a little bit careful, because if you take with a knight here, there might be a queen d4, and that could pick up a piece, potentially, even though white has some tricks there. But after the move d3, there's no rush to win one of these pawns back. Black guarding that pawn, and now knight bd2. So black is at least a pawn up here, Tanya, but an ugly-looking structure.
Yeah, that's the big compensation. You've got an extra pawn, but look at that. That last move, f6, just defending that central pawn, is another pawn move. So also really behind in development. It's those kind of openings that you need to be very, very familiar with, because you could come into a lot of pressure in the middle game as black behind in development. A bad pawn structure strategically just looks very difficult to handle. So we can expect a lot of concrete play here, concrete lines by Abasov. And The other thing that I've always, following Abasov's journey in this World Cup, the one thing that we see is that one, he has great opening preparation and this attitude of being able to play these kind of openings, these unfamiliar offbeat openings against the very best players in the world in a very fearless manner. And I think that's something that's played a big role in his journey so far, and especially taking these critical decisions when in time scrambles, going for this active play. And I think we can expect quite a fiery middle game in this one as well.
Yeah, definitely a fiery middle game coming up. And it's probably worth mentioning as well that I've been told, updated, that this was actually following a game that Abasov had as black against Vidit, but Vidit earlier on did indeed actually capture on e5. So Magnus is playing a little bit more of a gambit style here by not rushing into grabbing that pawn, but just trying to develop his pieces in a more harmonious way to start with. And I like this f6 move. Because, okay, if you've got a bad structure, you might as well hold on to the one asset you do have, which is your extra pawn. And we see another move there just being played. Black now must develop his pieces, and this knight is heading for what looks like a pretty decent square on f7, where it can control some central squares, and both sides just following normal development here. Probably black going to move this bishop out, get castled, and Magnus, I expect, will start targeting maybe the c5 pawn here. This is maybe the main weakness because it can't be guarded by another black pawn easily. So maybe you could get the knight to e4 and start targeting like this after castles. But an interesting position already, Tanya. You have this extra pawn, but an uncomfortable structure there. And we see Abasov, he just got up, Tanya. He's pretty confident, right? I mean, getting up, chilling out, going to wave to his fans, maybe do some high-fiving, Mexican wave as he goes by.
And I'm just looking at the position on the board, and you play this opening, you're up a pawn, but your pawn structure's been destroyed, and look at that move that Magnus has just made. Rook to g1, intentions cleared, shots fired. This is going to be very spicy. But yeah, for Abasov, just playing knight h6, developing that knight to the edge of the board. By the way, what have you done to the Simon Williams that I know of? When you said that knight is headed to a good square, you said f7. I thought you were going to get it to the center of the board with knight to f5 instead. That's the Simon Williams that I know.
Yeah, good point, Tanya. Hang a minute. On that reason, I'm just going to pour myself a coffee. Maybe that's what I need. A bit of coffee, I think, this morning. Because that indeed is a much more aggressive route that you pointed out there. The knight coming into the center, and I very much actually approve of that idea. A more active approach to the position. Of course, d4 is a great square for the black knight, defended by two pawns. But let's also just talk about this rook g1 move, Tanya. I mean, hang on a minute. Did he just mouse slip? Did Magnus just accidentally touch the rook? And then his opponent said, well, I'm sorry, you can't castle anymore because you touched the rook first. I think I fell for that as a junior once. I went to castle and I touched the rook, and my opponent said, to castle, you have to touch your king first. Kind of ridiculous rule. And he's put the rook on g1. I think we have to just, mention this move because it looks completely ridiculous, right? I mean, where does the white king go? But when we look at it a little bit deeper, it does have a good point. As you said, Tanya, you're getting ready to push. Do you know the name of this pawn, Tanya? I'm going to be checking out your pawn names as we go on today, so just be careful.
Enough time with you in Oslo, Simon, to know all the pawn names. And I'm ready for it when you ask. This one's the easy one. And chat, you know it as well. This is Gary the G-pawn. It's about to come up the board. And I fully agree with you that rook G1 looks a bit strange at first. But once you take a deeper look into the position, you understand that Magnus is perhaps intending to put his king to safety on the queen side. Go long castle. So one can imagine and envision the white bishop stepping up to b2, the white queen coming on to e2, and eventually a white king finding safety on the queen side. So rook g1 actually is preemptive of all of that, and the g-pawn can start advancing down the board, not only taking control of that f5 square, but at some point you want to start destroying black's kingside pawns, making use of that f6 move that Abasov made early on and use that f-pawn as a hook. Now, Simon, all that said, if we did not know, and chat, I want to hear this from you as well. If we did not know that this was a semifinals match between Magnus Carlsen and Najat Abasov, we've got to play guess the ELO here. You see this position out of the opening, and You would never believe that these are two super chess players, super GMs playing.
Well, Tanya, if I saw this opening and the way it's been played, with Black giving himself this horrendous pawn structure, with White forgetting about the castling rules and just moving the rook, I'd either guess this is like literally 2900 strength, like Magnus Carlsen, or maybe 900 strength. It would be somewhere. It couldn't be in the middle.
Nothing in the middle.
It's nothing in the middle. It's either a genius idea, like, oh my words, this is so clever, or it's like, yeah, you got a castle, because that's what you do in chess. You get your king safe. But I have to say, your point of playing against the hook on f6 by, let's just imagine that pawn ever gets there. It's going to really break up the whole of Black's structure. And this idea is quite a common idea when this structure has appeared. It happens in many other kind of positions. So I'm really liking this move, which Magnus must have prepared at home. I mean, if the knight comes to f5, we could see that pawn getting to g5 in a matter of seconds as well. G4, g5, moving up the board there. So I'm really liking the way this game started, Tanya.
And rook g1 as part of a prep could only be because, as you mentioned earlier, and as we were informed, that Abasov had a similar opening against Vidit. So Magnus definitely prepared it. There was a slight deviation earlier on by Vidit, but Magnus coming up with the big idea. And it seems to have put Nijat into a bit of a think right now, which...
Yeah, that's right. I mean, whoever gets the first sort of new idea in often gets the advantage because you've got your home preparation, your computer preparation, and your opponent hasn't. So I think it might be a good time to go and have a look at some of the other games, but I'm liking what Magnus has played here. I don't know without checking whether this is a new move. We'll get some information on that. I would be surprised if Rook G1 has been played before, but I'm very much liking this aggressive style from Magnus at the moment, Tanya.
I'm loving it. I'm loving it because one thing's for sure, that this one's going to be a fun fight. And while Abasov has a think, it's a good time to check in with our other two semi-finalists, Fabiano Caruana taking on Pragg. Fabi with the white pieces. And that's not the life position on the board, thankfully. One piece of madness is enough. In this one, we've got a much sober Italian opening. Take it from the top, Simon.
Yeah, so let's go through the moves. So we have Fabiano with the advantage of the white pieces, and he's playing e4, his normal opening, and Pragg playing in a very traditional style.
Simon, you just said advantage of having white, starting with white. Did you not see the tiebreak between Pragg and Arjun?
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, it was absolutely crazy. The tiebreak between, as you pointed out, those two amazing talents. Black was winning every game, right? It was phenomenal. I don't know what was happening there, but incredible scoring with the black pieces. But it is obviously in classical chess an advantage to have that first move, especially if you are Fabiano, because over his career he's proven time and time again that with white he's so well prepared. And have a traditional Italian. Normally this leads to quite maneuvering games, as we're going to probably see here. A6. A way to give that bishop a square to escape to. And this is one of the options that white has, pinning that knight straight away, trying to take advantage of the fact that black can't easily break the pin by putting the bishop there. So black plays h6, asking the bishop what's going to do. It keeps the pin. Black now developing a normal style, white doing the same. The bishop gets away from any possible moves which might get a tempo against it. And now white castles. I think there's some ideas with g5 here. If you're in a really brave move, I mean, obviously I'd be jumping at the opportunity to play that move. I'd probably be looking at what Magnus is doing and thinking, yeah, he's moving the g pawn. It must be a good idea. I mean, I'm just going to move it now. But queen e7, a more solid choice. And now white gains some space. Bishop e6. And Fabiano continues to gain space. And here, okay, Pragg decides I'm just going to keep it solid by castling. G5 maybe a little bit early to play. And one more move, rook e1. It looks like they're both in their theory at the moment, Tanya. This is the current position on the board.
That's a very rich position. We had something similar in the tie breaks between Arjun and Pragg. Pragg with the black pieces, but Arjun had misplayed the Italian and ended up in big, big trouble where, in fact, Pragg managed to get the G pawn rolling and the H pawn rolling. And that was disaster for white. But in this one, it's, of course, different from all of that. And looking at this position with no G5 on the board yet, my understanding of the Italian, and I play some of these structures with black, is that this pin along the diagonal is extremely annoying for black. So G5 is always in the air, even if black has shot castled, but it's a lot less tempting to play once black has gone shot castle. So instead, another approach by Pragg, he does trade off the light squared bishop, and I think he wants to step up with the queen, the square that has been vacated by that bishop. Again, the same idea. You want to step out of the pin. You want to try and dream someday of getting a d5 break in at the right moment. And it's on the board, Simon. Queen e6 played. So instead of g5 unpinning yourself, Pragg simply trades and moves out of the way.
Yeah, and I think the other idea, Tanya, very well explained. I don't know these positions well myself. I avoid them. They're very, very subtle, very hard to play. I mean, even putting the bishop on a7 looks quite illogical until you look at it a lot deeper. And these little ideas like queen e6, you have to maneuver on both sides. You have to be very patient for a lot of time. But I remember Korchnoi, one of his greatest results before he unfortunately passed away, was beating Fabiano with the black pieces. And he did a maneuver of the knight coming around to g6 in that game where he defeated Fabiano. I believe it was in the Gibraltar competition. So that's another idea that black has, getting the knight to a good square where it can force that bishop to make a decision. This is indeed one of the main problems that black has. This bishop is so annoying. So getting that knight out the way deals with that bishop, but it also maybe prepares black options of playing c6 and d5, things like this. As you mentioned as well, Tanya, d5 is an idea that black wants to play, but one of the issues would be his e5 pawn there. So if you play d5 too soon, white can exchange there, and the e5 pawn is quite often dropping. So I don't know if white may also want to try to, obviously not in this position, but at some point play for d4. Note Fabiano playing b5, and he's well in his preparation, Fabiano, as I expect Pragg is as well, because he's up on time, and he is making good progress over there on the queen side, Tanya. Maybe even at some point that pawn can come to b6 as a temporary sacrifice, backed up with some rook b1 move. But he's well ahead. I guess the knight will drop back to e7 here at some point. Do you exchange pawns first? I don't know.
That's always a tricky decision to make. Do you keep the pawns on, or do you trade and then fall back with the knight? One thing sure, that black does want to get that knight to e7. And of course, I could be wrong here, and Pragg might decide a different path. But thematically, you want to play the move knight e7. And then you're already looking at ideas of g5, knight coming on to g6, and kind of trying to jump in with your own pieces on the king side. Simon, I would be very tempted to not take on b5 right now, because once black does trade, I think white is just faster controlling the A line, the open A line, in case of a takes b5, a takes b5, the knight falling back. Your ideas of b6 always in the air seem a lot more powerful. White's knight can jump onto a5, attacking the b7 pawn, and it just feels like you want to keep the queen side closed for as long as possible. And I think Pragg has made the decision to fall back with the knight, and it's a really understandable one. Just knowing that all your pieces want to play on the king side, why would you want to open on the queen side before doing that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, this is a good rule to abide by. If you're weakest on one area of the board, as black is weakest on the queen side because white's got more space, you want to try to avoid making pawn moves. You want to try to avoid opening up the position where you're weakest, because your opponent's going to have better chances on those open lines as a general rule. And that is what black is just trying to do here. So trying to avoid opening up the A file for white's rook. So this maneuver seems very sensible. And that knight heading to g6. I don't know if you play g5 first. I actually really like your g5 move. I mean, I love a bit of attacking, Tanya. You know, give me a g pawn, I will throw it. And, you know, why not? Because white's got the initiative on the queen side. I think Pragg needs to try and generate something. And it's always fun generating on the area where your opponent's king is. And another little thing, this bishop is a silent assassin, isn't it, Tanya? It's always there, hinting at the white king on that diagonal. And okay, on the meantime, Fabiano, still in his preparation, might be getting ready to play this move potentially b6, or also just taking and bring the rook in. So Fabiano has made a lot of progress on the queen side here so far. Is it time for g5?
It really seems like that kind of position where one side is playing on the queen side. And so traditional chess wisdom, when your opponent is on one flank, you kind of go for the other one. b5 has been played, a lot of space gained by Fabi. b6 in the air. You were talking about Black's monstrous dark squared bishop. Fabi hears you, Simon. He's saying it's not going to be alive for too long. He's threatening b6, given the opportunity, given the moment, at the right time. And it might very well be the moment to start looking at creating concrete ideas on the king side. g5, and then it just becomes a race on either side. But as they say, checkmate finishes the game. So definitely when you're the one who's on the king side, attacking on the side where your opponent's king is, it can be a little more unpleasant. But one gets the feeling that for now, Fabi has made more progress, gained more space on the queen side, and Pragg is yet to really start on the king side.
Yeah, I agree with that one. It does seem like Fabi's made good progress over there, and we'll have to wait and see what Black is going to play. For example, will he play g5, and how Pragg is going to generate that counterplay, which he needs to do. But so far, pretty solid start. I mean, I think we can probably bring up our bird's eye view in a second of the boards, just see what else is happening there. We can see that Magnus has, it could be the day of the G pawn today, Tanya. Get the G pawns rolling. Because,
I love it.
You know, Magnus is throwing Gary up the board, and also we could see Pragg doing the same. So, but we have talked about Magnus's position already. So, is there a game you'd like to have a look at, Tanya?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about Gary the G-Pawn all across the FIDE World Cup. One with the white pieces. Very soon could be that second board that we see, Black also advancing with g5. It's a good moment to also get an update on the finals of the FIDE Women World Cup. Two very important matches, including the fight for third place, which would guarantee a spot into the candidates for either Tanzangi or Anna Muzichuk. And two interesting outcomes from the opening. Should we start with the Goryachkina Salimova board? And the reason I say that is because visually, if you just look at it, the first feeling is, one second, why is White so much behind in development on the king side?
Yeah, White has yet to move any of those pieces on the king side in this position. And as you say, this is a very important match. This is the final. And you have kind of one of the favourites with the white pieces, Aleksandra. But she is playing the wild card, Salimova, who's had this brilliant tournament. And I think another thing, we just have to confirm this, but another thing we think may happen, if Salimova is able to win this match, I think she might get the Grand Master title, which should be really well deserved because she's played fantastic chess. She's, you know, if she does win World Cup winner, she would deserve it. And she's one of the only international masters to make it to the final ever in the World Cup. So a lot to play for. But we could just very quickly go through the opening moves, see how we got to this position as well. So it starts off with probably the opening with the best name in the world. Tanya, would you agree? Potentially? Maybe?
It wasn't the King's Indian Defense. What are you talking about?
I think what's this one called, Tanya? It's called the that's right, the English opening. Clearly a great name for an opening, but it does quickly now go into a Queen's Gambit position. This is a standard Queen's Gambit, and after knight to f6, actually Black often avoids this move because of White's next idea. More common idea now is to put the bishop on e7, but okay. Here, White now plays the exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit, and the reason that this knight is often delayed is because of White's next move. White can pin the knight immediately, which is okay for Black, of course, but Black tries to avoid this sometimes. Now e3, the bishop is kicked away, and there it goes. And now a bit of a peculiar move here. This position is a very traditional structure that we've seen for, I don't know, 100 years, I reckon, at top level, dating back to some of those old great players. I was trying to think of an old great player from 100 years ago, and I couldn't think of any, Tanya. So I don't know if you can think of one off the top of your head, but I was going to pretend I knew a top player from 100 years ago. Let me guess. Alekhine?
I was going to say the same name. Great minds there. Yeah, that's a safe bet. And I think Alekhine was also an expert in the Queen's Gambit decline in these Carlsbad structures.
Indeed, he was. And after bishop g4 is kind of a unique move. This is a move which I'm not very aware of. And white has many options here. I mean, one idea could be to sort of start moving your pawns in a very aggressive fashion, but queen c2 is the normal square to put your queen in the structure on the half open file. Black now castles, and the bishop is given a little kick, asking where it's going to go. But I expect this is black's idea. Black wants to put the bishop on g6, but already, Tanya, after a move like bishop d3, I'm kind of wondering if that bishop, are we going to see another g pawn coming up the board after bishop d3? I mean, is the g pawn going to go wild in every game? Bishop d3, and here comes Gary again. I mean, is this bishop going to be good or bad? I think that's the question in the opening here.
No such thing as too much Gary, right, in chess. So g4 would be a massive, massive threat once you take away the g6 square. I really like the idea that you mentioned. Black's dream is just to get the bishop on g6, and you just stop it. Prophylaxis, you put your own bishop, developing it to d3, and one gets the feeling that black needs to be really quick at that moment. It's clear that Salimova has something in mind. She's got to know what she's doing to go into this line with bishop g4 and putting her bishop at the edge of the board where it can run out of squares. And seeing her style of play throughout the tournament, Simon, we've seen her take these very gutsy, brave decisions, which has really gotten her this far in the event. I think she's going to go for it in the center. So if you play a move like bishop d3, the first move that comes to mind in this kind of a position for black is strike in the center with a move like c5, because you really don't have time to develop your own knight, allowing white to go g4. So c5 is what I think she would have in mind, but I have no idea where that would lead to if white continues with the plan of g4.
Yeah, this could get very, very messy, as you point out, Tanya. I mean, just to show this idea again, we kind of want to play g4 here, but black would then just play bishop g6, and black is doing absolutely fine here. There's no problems at all. You probably go bishop d3, maybe the bishops get exchanged, which helps black generally in these kind of positions. So by playing bishop d3 first, after bishop h5, you're just aiming to take there. So as you mentioned, black has to be quick. So c5, I love this move, trying to open the position. And after g4, what is happening here, Tanya? This could suddenly explode into life. And I expect this is what Aleksandra is thinking about at the moment. Can she play this way? Because bishop g6 now, how else do you save your bishop? Well, I'm assuming here I'm just going to take on g6. And I mean, even this is very complicated. The critical move would be queen takes g6, but the white king is in the middle. There's potentially good counterplay that black can get here, Tanya, in this kind of variation.
Yeah, this looks like a complete mess, but Goryachkina has played a completely different approach. And I think I understand why she's made the move that she has. It wasn't something that we were considering. She's traded the knight on f6. And I think her point is that after bishop f6, you recapture it with the bishop. You definitely don't want to spoil your pawn structure. And now white has the option to actually take advantage of black's light squared bishop being undefended with the move queen to f5. And that's a double attack, Simon. I'm hitting your bishop on h5, and I'm hitting your central pawn on d5 as well. I know that I'm really behind in development, but does black have enough compensation for losing that central pawn?
Very nice idea. I didn't see this idea at all. And I think it's clear here that we can put a couple more moves on the board, because you have to move the bishop now. And white's idea, if white decides to throw the queen in, would be to take here. Now that you're a pawn down, you probably don't want to exchange queens. So, I mean, my first thought would just be to develop. But in general, this kind of position could be very interesting. I mean, I don't know if this is preparation at all from Salimova. You'd think it probably is, because bishop g4 is quite a strange move. It's also quite risky for white, as you say, because for white to castle kingside is going to take 3 moves. You have to move the knight, you have to move the bishop, and then you castle, which takes a long time. You don't really want to castle queenside. That just looks too risky to my eyes. Too many open lines there. So it's, can black in this position generate some kind of counterplay? I mean, maybe you can allow the exchange of queens, but as black, if I hadn't prepared this with a computer, I'd be like, I want to attack, I don't want to exchange queens. Even something like queen e7 looks quite logical, with ideas of rook d8 taking on d4. So this could get very wild as well. I mean, let's just put it on the board. Let's say I do play queen e7, maybe not the top choice, I mean, the computer is now greedily saying you can take another pawn, but for a human to start playing like this is really risky. Let's just say I develop my knight, and my development is getting great already here. And I think one move black will need in this type of structure is like c5 to try and break it open even more. But I'm sure Goryachkina has not prepared this position as white. And in such an important game, you would be scared, wouldn't you, Tanya, grabbing these pawns like this against a potentially well-prepared opponent. So is she going to really go queen f5? That would be a very brave move. She's thinking about it now. Let's just go back to that position.
She reaches out and she's done it. It's on the board. And 100% agree with you that getting greedy for that second pawn on b7, that is asking, looking, begging for trouble. You definitely don't want to do that. But the central pawn on d5 is of value. Black in return has the compensation of a bishop pair, better development, open lines for the rooks to land in, and definitely Simon Black will not be trading queens after Goryachkina does pick up the d5 pawn. It's going to be a fighting middle game, and I think for Salimova, it really suits her style of play. She loves the initiative. She loves to be the one who's on the attack. An aggressive player. She's shown that she's got this unique ability to take these extremely brave decisions with even little time on the clock. And that's been fantastic to see. So this kind of a position, I think Salimova does thrive here. We will jump back to this one and see how it develops. You got one more very critical game in the Women World Cup with Anna Muzychuk taking on Tan Zhongyi in the fight for that third place, the spot into the candidates. And that one looks equally wild in the center.
Yeah, let's go to that one. So this is a really important clash because, as we mentioned, the winner of this match will get that candidate's place, but it's not clear that the loser will automatically get a place in that all-important way to become world champion. Now, again, Anna Muzychuk playing the best-named opening in the world. This position is actually, I believe, a pretty common position from the English opening. I might be a little bit biased there. I don't really mean that, by the way, but let's have a look. So it's the traditional English with knight c3 and now e5. And if you think about it, this position is basically a reverse Sicilian. But white playing the Sicilian has the extra tempo, so white avoids most of the dangerous variations. Now g3 played and c6. And this is in basically the c3 Sicilian that black is trying to play here. Black just wants to build up a big center with the pawns. And the next move, therefore, is the key move from white. White is trying to disrupt that by at least asking a question to that pawn. That pawn comes forwards. White's knight comes into the center. And you get this position with colors reversed with the pawn there. And we saw that actually, I believe in the last, there were two C3 Sicilians, weren't there, Tanya, in the last matchups. And you got this position in one of them. I think Pragg played this position. Maybe it was Pragg. But the c3 Sicilian was very popular in the last matches of this competition. But let's keep going. Bishop c5, asking the knight the question. That knight comes and gains the tempo by attacking the bishop. And now the bishop comes back to e7. Not one of the more popular moves, this one, but still a safe square. White continues developing. Black gets this very nice pawn chain. White, though, starts to chip away at that pawn chain. And here we are, current position on the board. And the one thing I do know about this, because I played the English opening most of my life, it's the first ever opening I played. When I was a more positional player, Tanya, I don't know what happened to me. I had a rush of blood to the head when I hit my teenage years, and I went a bit crazy, I think. But I used to play quite positionally. And I know that theoretically white's supposed to just be a little bit better in this position. Because if this pawn is forced to do something, let's say black takes here, well, you get very nice pressure against the isolated pawn, and white is also a bit better developed here. So it's going to be interesting to see what Tan has prepared after this d3 move. I'm surprised that black's gone down this. And also, looking at the clock times, maybe Anna has just got that first surprise in, Tanya.
And let's also once again point out the big history between these two players. This is the semifinals matchup. It's a rematch from the 2021 Sochi FIDE World Cup semifinals between Anna Mizichuk and Tanzangi, which Tanzangi won, and also a rematch of the 2017 World Championship match, which was also in the FIDE World Cup, which Tanzangi won. So Anna Mizichuk looking at this as getting her revenge as well. And of course, the big third spot at stake. Agree with everything that you just said, Simon, especially this move D3. It's a really nice move, challenging the center, forcing Black to take a decision because of all the attack on that central E4 pawn. And Tan does take the decision to trade, which means that Black ends up with an isolated queen's pawn for the rest of the game. And suddenly, this over-ambitious play with the pawns in the center could turn out to be a long-term strategic weakness for Black. Black will castle, White's rooks will come to the center, the D line, and it will be about, can a White make enough of this weakness or not? I have to say that I'm a little biased to these positions. I like playing against the IQP, Simon, rather than be the player who has it. I know that there are dynamics. When you have the isolated queen's pawn, you can look for attacking possibilities. You can look for the right time for the knight from f6 to jump to e4. But I really like the long-term strategic weakness to fight against. I favor White in this opening outcome.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tanya. I mean, I quite often like playing with the isolated pawn because generally there's a couple of rules. When you have this structure, this is the isolated pawn for what should be obvious reasons. Black can't defend it with another pawn. It's a bit of a Billy no mates. You know, it doesn't have any friends. This poor little pawn. You've got to feel a bit sorry for it. You kind of want a friend to come and guard it like that or that, but you can't do that here. So it's a long-term weakness, but it does give Black a bit of a space advantage. And in general, that means that Black, in normal isolated pawn positions, can play very actively with her pieces. But in this case, it's not so easy, it seems, to Black to do that, because White also has the development advantage. I think this fianchetto, you don't normally get in when you're playing against the isolated pawn. This also helps White, because one of Black's main ideas would be to attack on this diagonal, but it's not as effective here. So in general, I think this is a very pleasant position for Anna from the opening, and her opening strategy has worked very well here. I mean, there's even a threat of just winning a pawn at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you could think about taking it immediately or just build the pressure after you go Shark Castle, just bringing your pieces to safety. To me, it appears out of all the games that we've gone through that White is doing really well in most of the opening outcomes. We've seen potential Gary the G-pawn that could advance. We're seeing some strategic weaknesses already, but all around very dynamic play. Queen still on the board, maximum pressure, pieces, very few pieces have been traded off in all the live action that we have. And Simon, we're just getting started, but I think the openings haven't disappointed, which means it's going to be a lot of fun in the middle games.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's just brewing up at the moment, and I'm very excited to go back and see Magnus's game, where he is the main Gary pusher at the moment. So we'll come back to that shortly. But there's a number of exciting games getting into motion at the moment in this very important round.
And this is our live view from the Marriott Boulevard playing hall where the World Cup is happening. A huge crowd in support of the local hero, Nejat Abasov, right there. It is all eyes on Magnus Carlsen versus Nejat Abasov. We will be back with that game and all the other games on the other side of this break. Don't go anywhere as action heats up in the semi-finals of the FIDE World Cup.
This course is about White playing d4, all the tools you need to get an advantage with White and not be tricked early in the opening. Now, it has a really long, complicated name that I'm going to mispronounce now, so you can make fun of me. Okay, don't make fun of me too much. I'm trying to help you here. It's called the Chelyabinsk variation, and I'm probably mispronouncing Chelyabinsk. That's why I call it the A6 Slav.
I remember that day. It was unreal. I definitely felt like I was walking on air. Yeah, it was like such a beautiful feeling because I won the first championship that was actually combining women and men into the same section. So in addition to winning the title and the money, which I really needed, it was like something like $9,500, but I was like a college student at the time, and like literally that was like all the money I had in my bank account after cashing that check. So that was really cool. And then also I got an IM norm. So it was like a little bit of everything.
And the World Cup continues for the young and old, as we see probably the youngest in the crowd there, inspired by the chess that he's seeing, the heroes that he's seeing, especially the local hero, the local star, Nejat Abasov, playing against world number one Magnus Carlsen. And there we see a house full at the playing venue. Magnus Carlsen yet to win a World Cup. This is his third semi-final at the World Cup. It was back in 2007 that he made it to the semi-finals, lost to the eventual winner, Goryachkina, and then in 2021, a repeat of the story when he was knocked out of the semi-final by Jan Krzysztof Duda, who Simon went on to win the World Cup. And this time, Magnus, though not motivated to play in the candidates, but to win the World Cup is a huge motivation for the world number one.
Yeah, massive motivation. And as we mentioned, Magnus has said this himself. He's won everything else in chess. He's not so interested in the classical chess as much anymore, but this is the one event he hasn't won. He got knocked out by Duda in the last one when he got in the semi-finals. So he got actually in the same position he's in here, the semi-finals, and that's where he left the competition. So he's really motivated, as every champion is, to win everything, win all the titles. And he's playing this, as you say, this sort of rather, Abasov, the local hero, but the shocking player, I would say, so far of the competition in his results. I mean, he is the 69th seed, and he's got his place in the candidates. Kind of a dream come true for him. And we were looking last time, Tanya, at Rook G1, getting ready to throw Gary up the board. Tally-ho, Gary. Off you go, old boy. Can you do a good English accent, Tanya? Tally-ho. Can you say tally-ho for me, Tanya?
Oh my gosh, it's gonna be awful, but I'll give it a go.
Yep.
Tally-ho, let's go. Carry the Jeep on. No.
It sounded like your normal accent there, but just with tally-ho.
I feel I just did that. I just said tally-ho, but did not change the accent.
Exactly. You didn't change anything. You just said tally-ho.
I'll do a better job next time.
Okay. So that was a bit naughty of me to put you on the spot like that. Not like me to do that, is it, Tanya?
Okay, let me go. Let me try one more time.
Okay, go for it.
Tally-ho, carry the Jeep on. No, that just sounded more like my Indian accent more than ever. It's just so hard to do this. But I'll get there someday.
Yeah, I mean, my accents are horrendous as well, so you definitely don't want to hear
What are you
them.
saying? I think the general perception in the world is that the English accent is one of the nicest in the world. And maybe chat can tell us which accent they prefer the most. But what I hear in general is that there's a lot of love for the English accent.
Well, maybe.
Tally-ho, the English accent.
Tally-ho, the English accent. Off we go, old boy. We do love a good old English accent in the chat here. Jolly good. And right, I'm just going to speak normally now because otherwise this is going to go completely off the rails. And Rook G1 was played there. I mean, this was a great idea. And we see that Abasov now plays Bishop A6, and the computer is not a fan of this. And it's very easy to play a bad move when you're faced with a new idea. But I don't think it's a terrible idea. I think the point is if the knight comes here, black wants to exchange that one off. But the question does remain, Tanya, what is the bishop actually doing there, right? I mean, apart from trying to exchange a knight on c4, it's not doing much at all. And Magnus just continues. G4, tally-ho. I heard him shout that in the tournament hall. I don't know if we'll be able to get the audio of that. Black drops the knight backwards. And now I don't think you might be able to play G5 here, but black is guarding that with 3 pieces. So you would have to sacrifice another pawn. So instead, Magnus just puts his queen on E2, which is lining up the queen against the king. And now G5 is becoming more of a threat, because if things get exchanged on G5, the E5 pawn may drop, and the queen is just really strong there. So Abasov has to get developed, and he goes bishop E7. Very logical looking move, defending that G5 again, that square, and maybe trying to castle. But I would also be a bit scared about castling kingside if I was black here, Tanya, with that rook ready to kill me. I mean, it looks like the unique play is kind of working all right for white here.
And I can hear the ambulance outside my window, and it feels like the ambulance is coming for black's position right here. As you're saying, if black's king was to castle on the king side, the rook is perfectly lined up. I think this is a very critical moment, which is going to really show what is Magnus's intention and the kind of approach he wants for this game. Because I see two very reasonable ways forward. And I did read the feature chat, which said that G5 is the best engine move here. So chat helping us out with that. G5 definitely looks explosive and very direct, extremely concrete, taking advantage of that E5 undefended pawn if black was to recapture on G5. The other idea, as we were talking about earlier, that I really like is simply to continue with development as well. You keep all your threats on the board, the age-old wisdom of how a threat is better than its execution, and you just continue with development. Take out that bishop. I would put it on B2, also lining up further against the E5 pawn, so that if ever you get to it, it becomes that much more dangerous, and you're also clearing the path to get your own king to the safety. I'm a sucker for development, so bishop b2, long castle would have been my approach, but I would love to see g5 happen on the board as well, where things get completely chaotic and messy. And according to the eval bar, it is the best move in the position, as was pointed out. Maybe we can do a little deep dive into what actually happens if Magnus chooses that approach.
Yeah, let's do it. I agree, again, everything you said, Tanya. I think this is a very important position to see what Magnus's mindset is, because he can go g5. This looks very logical. We'll come to that in a second. Or he can just develop a piece and the threat is always there. But his idea of going rook g1 must be to play this move at the right time. So let's just have a deep dive into the move g5. And the first thing we can see is that this pawn is quite a nuisance for black. I mean, if black ever tries to castle kingside, you're just going to run into the rook, and you would never dream of castling in this position. But what else can black do? Can black capture this pawn? And to my eyes, that also looks very risky. I mean, maybe you can. Let's try taking with the knight, maybe, because the reason I'm going to take the knight, I kind of want to get rid of your knight on f3. So let's just try this one, when white's idea will be to damage the black pawns even more.
Gosh.
I mean, let's just have a look at these pawns, Tanya.
Let's not have a look at these pawns.
Ugh, feel a little bit sick. I mean, black is 2 pawns up, but oh my words, all that black needs to do now, Tanya, is move that pawn there, and it will be like the ugliest pawn structure I think I've ever seen. And here, well, what is Magnus's idea? And there might not even be anything immediate. I mean, just because the pawn structure is so bad, I mean, you have to be careful. If you try taking a pawn straight away, you might give black a chance to now make some exchanges. So bishop f6 runs into a check, but maybe a move like queen d4. And, the more exchanges that are made, I feel the easier black's position becomes. And you don't need to rush taking this pawn here. You can build up. And maybe now a move like bishop b2 or even knight to f3 might be played, and it just feels really horrible, this position for black. White's going to win at least 1 pawn back, probably 2 pawns back, and everything's disgusting about the structure here. But it is 2 pawns, Tanya, so maybe there's some play in this position for black. I don't like it though for black, this particular line. So let's just go back to this move g5, and we're still, I think, waiting to see what will be played in the game. So what else can black do? And it just feels like if black ever takes this pawn, there's just too many problems. So maybe black should just ignore it and do something else. So what else can black do? I'd love to try and get my king safe. I don't want to go kingside. If I go queenside, it's not going to be very safe over there either. But what can I do? So let's try moving the queen. If I put it on a solid square like c7, what is white's follow-up going to be here? In this position, is there anything immediate? I mean, taking on f6, this way black's structure does remain a lot more solid because these guys look after each other. You do have the g file, but I don't think there's any way white can immediately use that. So maybe in all of these lines, Tanya, white is going to come back to bishop b2. I mean, this is just a very useful move, right? Where you are, again, just applying more pressure to the center and just improving things as you go on. And we could get a position where black castles queenside, and again, Magnus has to think about the way to play. Maybe he's going to play something with castles here as well and just wait and see. But maybe nothing immediate after g5 in position, Tanya, but I still really do like just white structure so much better than black structure. What will he play? Will he play g5 or bishop b2? I reckon, Tanya, he's going to go bishop b2. That's a more Magnus move, in that Magnus loves keeping the tension when I watch him play. Are we going to have a little bet here? I'm going to go bishop b2. Do you want to bet
Bishop
g5?
b2 was my plan from the start. You've just very conveniently taken the first bet and then forced me to take g5. But I will not be surprised if we see g5. g5 will be a tally-ho moment if it does happen. g5 is the tally-ho move here.
Tally-ho move.
It's a tally-ho move. But that said, Simon, I would also play bishop b2 long castle. It just feels I want to keep g5 in the air at the right time. And maybe it's just going to be a switch up of move order. You go g5 as the lines that we were seeing. Bishop b2 is the correct follow-up because it's impossible for black to really react on the king side. A trade on g5, you were not overstating the case by calling that pawn structure absolutely disgusting for black. White doesn't need to do anything, doesn't need to rush with regrabbing the pawns. In fact, leaving black with these pawns is actually good news for white. These pawns help white get the advantage because you're not only threatening to take the pawns, but look at the squares in front of the pawn. White's knight landing on e4, building up the pressure. The bishop from b2 always attacking e5. And the thing with these pawns is that it takes away key squares from black's pieces. So you really want to keep them on the board because they're a huge asset to white on the board rather than off it. G5, FG5, not going to happen, not in this lifetime. And if that doesn't happen, then the logical follow-up, even after G5, would be a move like develop the bishop to B2, go long castle. So I think we're going to see these moves, but perhaps just to switch up in the move order. But because I like to live, oh my God, I was just going to say I like to live life on the edge, so I will take the bet. And I'm glad I didn't, because Magnus has made his decision. He did reach out for the bishop, and it's on.
Bishop B2 here. So the tally-ho move, we can't hear tally-ho anymore because it hasn't been played. But as soon as G5 is on the board, Tanya's going to stream tally-ho in her best English accent, which is proving to be pretty bad.
Which is pretty bad. I think I can hear a tally-ho. But there will be a tally-ho moment, proper big one, because G5 is in the air and will arrive at the right moment. Bishop B2 just feels like the natural move here without overcomplicating things.
Yes, Bishop B2 seems very logical. You develop your last piece, you keep the threat of G5 there. You don't have to play it straight away. For example, you might want to see where black puts the king first. I mean, if black goes kingside, then maybe it is a move you can build up with. But I like Bishop B2. It only helps white's position. And I think another problem that black has here, Tanya, is just finding a plan for black, right? White has a clear plan. White can improve, play G5, and then start targeting things depending what happens after G5. For example, you can maybe capture, get your rook into the position when you play this important move, or you could try to play G6 at the right moment. So white has really easy moves to play, but often in chess, it's who has the easier moves. They will have the advantage, even in an equal position. But I can't really see black's plan, Tanya. I mean, this bishop is not doing anything. This bishop is very bad, trapped behind the pawns in the middle. This knight, it's not going anywhere. You can put it on D6, but I don't see where it's going after that. Maybe black can castle queenside, but even that's not really a plan. So I'm struggling to plan for black here, Tanya.
I think we have a move that at least answers what Nijat has in mind. He has, for the time being, stopped Magnus from going longside castling. He's played the move queen to a5, a developing queen move, something that you pointed out earlier. Bring out the queen. He is targeting that a2 pawn. So for the time being, long castle can potentially just run into queen a2, which is something that you perhaps don't want to allow as white. And then this move makes a lot of sense because it pins your knight on d2, so there are no more jumps from the knight coming on to e4. Is it time now, perhaps, to think about g5? You were talking about what is black's plan here, and Simon, I think at some point, black has to think about getting in an e4 break the center, but it has to be timed really well, combining the pin on with the queen on the knight on d2 and the bishop a6 hitting the queen on e2. I don't think it's possible at the moment, but it's always an idea in the air for black.
I like it, yeah. E4 is probably a clever move that can be played here at some point. Not here, because obviously the queen can take it, but I'm just wondering about this castles move, because, you know, it looks like it's not possible. But let's just double check that. I mean, the whole point of putting the queen here is to stop castling. But if white does castle, and black continues with what looks like the obvious plan, queen takes a2. Is there any move? I was thinking queen e4 here, starting to really get some concrete threats on the board could be interesting. I mean, you know, maybe white can even play this. Maybe white can even let black grab this pawn because there's not an obvious follow-up. I mean, I think queen e4 would be a nice way to play now, and maybe g5. It wouldn't be like Magnus to gambit a pawn in this way. Again, you know, players' styles. If you've got a nice position, you think already, as maybe white does here, why would you give this pawn up? I'm just wondering, though, if he can castle. I mean, this could be quite a crazy move to play, and just to allow that to accelerate the development. Possibly an idea.
Would you call it a tally-ho move if Magnus was to go long castle?
I would call it a bit of a, I don't know about tally-ho. I think it's sort of scallywag. It's more of a, ooh, you scallywag. That's like a, ooh, that's kind of like a crazy move, right? It's the kind of move you like, you know, I would
be gobsmacked.
I'd be, yeah, pretty
yeah.
much. gobsmacked as well.
At first, when you mentioned that there's even an option for white to go long castle, I was shocked because I thought queen a5 just stops it.
Yeah.
But it feels like it could be a bit of a mousetrap there. You kind of lure the queen to a position where it's far away from defending his own king. And, you're still a couple of moves away from bringing it back. And look at that bishop on b2. If after long castle, black does take on a2, that bishop on b2 is a great defender. Black doesn't even have a single check from there. But unless you find something direct, let's just show that long castle. And the eval bar.
So one of the ideas I was thinking is after you attack c6, let's say that black naturally defends it. I want to maybe in some positions play knight c4. I'm just trying to trap your queen as well. I don't know if this is the right idea, but your queen has no way out here. And if you have to take on c4, you could suddenly get this queen being a real nuisance attacking e6. It's, again, it's quite a weird position. I think the idea of dragging black's queen here, it looks like black's queen is very active, but it might just be on a bad square where it can't defend the pawns there. So an interesting idea, but it's not necessary, I think, for white to castle here. It's probably more sensible moves to play in the position, like g5 straight away.
Yeah, I would think that g5 makes a lot of sense here because it's a move now, especially with the bishop lined up on b2. It just feels like it's a good time. A long castle, unless Magnus finds something concrete or a way to at least win back one of the pawns or find chances against that queen, it feels like when you have a good position out of the opening, you don't need to take such drastic measures. The position just doesn't demand it. A very interesting approach if he does go long castle. My heart is with g5. I want tally-ho. I want Gary the g-pawn on the board. And I would be happy to see g5 right now. It would mean that, and he's reaching out for something.
What's he going for?
He does make a decision.
Oh, he's playing another move. Very interesting decision here. Magnus has played quite a committal move. I mean, I really liked your g5. I mean, also there's some ideas of the rook doing a ridiculous maneuver after g5. I love weird rook moves like that. But Magnus has actually played, I say, a committal move because it didn't look like, Magnus is a master of strategy, but he's put the pawn on c4. The computer does not like this move, as I can sort of see as a big clue there, the big dubious mark. But maybe this is, well, I don't know, what's the idea here? I mean, I'm assuming the idea is just to confirm the pawn structure, so you stop any ideas that black has of giving up the c-pawn. So if we go back one move, let's just say I play like h3, a move you might have to worry about. I mean, you mentioned e4 here, but let's remember black's a pawn up. Maybe another idea black has is c4. And the point in these positions is that this bishop can now get out of its cage. Yes, you sack a pawn back, but if you can get your bishop maybe to somewhere like this, your bishop is starting to creep in to the structure. So I think the positional basics of c4 is just to rule out that you're going to make sure black's pawns are doubled forever, so they can never really break. They can never sacrifice themselves to energize the other pieces. But it is committal, Tanya, because you can't move the knight to that square anymore, and you're blocking the position up to a bigger extent. So interesting decision from Magnus there.
I think it's a really cool move. Everything that you pointed out, white shuts off the light squared bishop that black has on a6, but not only the light squared bishop, but also the dark squared bishop on e7. With no way for black to now advance c4, that bishop is dead as well. White's got two knights against black's two bishops. In general, you want to keep the positions closed. You want to make sure that black doesn't get activity with that bishop pair. So it takes care of that strategic factor as well, really blocking down the center. The problem of that knight on d2, you can solve it by eventually getting that knight to e4. So it still has good squares in the position. But I think, Simon, the more I look into this position, I'm just wondering if Magnus actually also has ideas of combining what we mentioned earlier. And I don't know what's the right way to demonstrate it, but you're already showing it with the arrows. Exactly. So let's just make a non-move by black here to kind of just show the idea. So let's say long castle. And now maybe white can actually get the king to safety with long castle, because if you take on a2, white has a luft for the king on c2, connecting the rook suddenly. All right, so king c2 works, and rook a1 is in the air, targeting the queen, targeting the bishop, the pawn on a7. And this could also be a hidden motive in the position. So c4, I really don't care about that cross the computer awarded it to, because it just feels like quite quite a power move, taking away a lot of play from black and with threats of his own of being able to go long castle.
I totally agree. I mean, sometimes we've got to just disregard what the computer says, and it's very easy as a commentator, a player, a viewer. I expect most people watching the chat, if they've got the computer running, to get memorized with what the computer is saying. You know, you don't think normally like a human. You start thinking very artificially, and a move like this is a very human move because it does a lot of positional things. As you say, Tanya, it shuts both of the bishops down, but the computer for some reason doesn't like it. I'm not even sure why it doesn't like it here, but I think that habit of just jumping at the computer's first choice is something I certainly got to remove from my job as well. But black has played the move, Tanya. Black has ruled out for the time being this g5 idea and played g5 himself, and that seems like a good option because White's possible move was almost quite scary there. So black's just trying to say, you're not going to play it yet. Magnus has played another logical move. Magnus is trying to ask that pawn the question and attacks it with the move h4, Harry 4. So we might not be hearing Tanya shouting tally ho for a while now. I'm hoping we do a bit later on. It will give her a chance to improve that English accent. Tally ho, but we'll see. Not for a couple of moves.
Oh, still not there.
All right, try again. I didn't hear that. One more time.
I'm glad you didn't. It was awful.
Okay.
But I agree with you that after g5, I don't think we're going to see white g5 land in anymore, because I'll be quite surprised if Abasov takes the decision to actually capture on h4, further ruining the pawn structure. What black seems to have in mind is actually to solidify the situation on the king side with a move like h6. At least that's something that I would consider here. So that if you grab on g5, I can retake with the h pawn and just keep everything still intact. You don't have your g5. My e5 pawn is still defended. I get control on the h line. So I'm not expecting Magnus to actually take on g5, and I see that h6 indeed is on the board. And now I'm just wondering, Simon, what about our other tally-ho idea of white actually going for alongside queenside castling, inviting black to get greedy with the a2 pawn?
It makes a lot of sense, Tanya. I agree here. I mean, you want to get your knight out of the pin. You want to try to put your king in the safest place you can. And these pawns do act as a shield for the white king. So I really like this idea of castling. I don't think black can grab this pawn on a2. It was quite risky when we didn't have a definite plan, but now that we've got the c2 square, this rook a1 just looks way too scary for black. Black has to play queen a5 here, so we can have a look a bit further, but I don't believe it. Rook a1, the black queen has to now go to b6 to defend the bishop. So black is 2 pawns up here, but it just feels a bit greedy, doesn't it? I mean, my eyes are getting drawn to queen e4 here with the idea of coming in this way with the queen. But there's other moves like, even trying to attack that queen with the bishop coming over here. Maybe black can take this, but it just seems really dangerous. You're 1 pawn up. Why grab another pawn and give white a bigger initiative? So I like your casting move here, Tanya. Looks like the right move to play.
He's about to take a decision, although it was kind of hard to find a killer blow in that last position where it felt like black is hanging by a thread, with the queen falling back to b6. And it is 2 extra pawns for black after rook a1, queen b6. But one just feels that with the doubling up on the a line as a potential idea, queen jumping onto the center of the board, it is very dangerous. Magnus, meanwhile, takes another approach. He still keeps the king in the center, but he's trying to force Abasov into a decision on the king side. He now first moved the rook from h1 to g1. Now it finds itself back onto the home square, putting pressure on the h line with threats of, at the right moment, trading on the g line. Right now, the good news for black is the knight on f7 does defend the h8 rook. So there's nothing to worry or panic about at the moment for black.
Yeah, I think there's another clever idea, rook h1 here, Tanya. I think Magnus can now castle, right? Kingside, because he's put his rook back on the right square.
Too clever for me, Sai.
Yeah, you can't castle if you moved your rook already.
That would be the ultimate tally-ho moment.
That would be more like what the hell moment, I think, So if Magnus castles here after moving his rook a couple of times, I'd love to see that happen. It'd be very good video footage for us. But a good move, rook h1, obviously lining up on the h file. And white, I mean, Magnus doesn't need to risk potentially that idea of black taking another pawn. He's sticking to his more positional approach. And I mean, where does the king go? We've mentioned it going to c1. You could also maybe put it on g2, Tanya, potentially. I think it's much riskier on g2 because the king side can open up at any moment. And you could see a black rook lining up against the white king there. And black has some breaks like f5 or h5 to get rid of this g pawn and open up the line. So I think I mean, maybe you can go king d1. You know, if you want to be really safe, just go king d1 and go king c2. I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. You know, just avoid any chances your opponent has to take on a2. That feels like a real Magnus idea, Tanya, playing king d1 and king c2. I don't know what a Magnus idea is. Normally very good. But I could see
every good idea
idea
feels like a Magnus idea on the chessboard. But king d1, king c2 actually reminds me of the world champion Dingler, and he's really famous for these king marches that he makes. So many of his games come to mind where he's already castled on the king side and then marches all the way with the king to the queen side and ends up winning the game. So definitely something that is on Magnus's mind. I like it. It's not something that mere mortals like myself, it would come to me very quickly. But the moment you point out, one can see that it has the advantage of not only sidestepping the pin on d2, not only connecting the rook, but you kind of throw the ball to your opponent. And it's not very easy for black to find useful moves in the position. And it comes down to that move c4 that Magnus made that really clamps down the space and the moves that black has. Black really can't go short side castle, can't really go castle on the queen side. The king also has to be in the center. The moment I say that, there's a move on the board, and Abasov is like, what are you talking about? It's the queenside castling for me. I thought that white would have the move like queen e4, hitting on c6, and your idea of queen g6 eventually.
Yeah, queen e4 looks very tempting. I mean, I agree with you. It looks really risky to put the king over here. I mean, these younger players like Abasov, and someone in the chat earlier asked, can you give a bit more background of Abasov, Simon? And I would love to say I know all of his history, but I can't actually say that because there's so many grandmasters who are incredibly talented. And I think he's like number 97th in the world, potentially, around there, rating-wise. And it's so hard to keep up with them because they've all got a lot of talent. They all train incredibly hard. And Abasov is one of them. He's a young player. He's had a phenomenal run here. He's obviously flying high. And I kind of like how he's defending the position that he's had. But, okay, after castles, the position is kind of heating up. White's castle as well. We have looked at this interesting position. But I also see, Tanya, in the other games, there's a lot of action going on as well, right? Where we will keep a close eye on this one as we go on.
Yeah, it's a good moment to switch, but just let's quickly point out on the Magnus board, he has sacrificed that a2 pawn, or is at least tempting black to go pawn hunting, but it's a position, it's an idea that we've looked at, where Magnus steps up with that king to c2, and the queen on a2 starts feeling the heat with the rook coming back to that open A line. So Abasov, the 28-year-old, 69 seed in this tournament, 97 world ranked, what a star performance he's had in this World Cup. One would have expected Shakhriyar Mamedyarov or Temur Rajabov to be at the stage, but it is Nijat Abasov who is playing in the semifinals and has pretty much booked his spot into the candidates. He finds himself at the World Cup after a strong finish in the European Championship, Simon, and it's been quite the tournament of his life. But you're absolutely right. It is time to check in with the other boards. And let's move on to our clash of generations between Fabiano Caruana and Pragg. Both players, for the first time, finding themselves in the semi-finals of a World Cup. And a lot has happened since we last checked on this game.
Yeah, so the last time we checked was after Queen e6, pretty much, then b5, knight e7. And we were thinking that White's play on the queen side was coming very quickly here. For example, White has already, with rook b1, ideas of playing b6, which would cause that bishop some problems, and also taking on a6 and infiltrating with the rook to b7. That also is very tempting. We wanted Pragg to go tally-ho and go Gary 5 here. But Pragg's like, hang on a minute, Simon, just calm yourself down. I'm going to play a lot more solid than that. And I think the move you play, it makes some sense, right? Because b6 is probably white's main threat. Let's just say you play a nothing move. What is white's idea? Well, I think it's to play b6. And when you take on b6, the knight comes here. You don't really want to lose your bishop here. Just look at the strength of that knight. It can be even supported by white's pawn. It kills the bishop, and white would have a very sizable advantage here. So actually, Pragg, realizing this, goes knight d7. And this gives black more control of that square. So a nice mature retreat there with the knight. And a strange decision here. I mean, I say strange. It's strange to my eyes, but not if you're a great player like Fabiano. He voluntarily gives up his bishop for that knight. And I suppose his figuring is, well, my bishop is not very good anymore. He could get closed down, but even f5 could potentially try to trap my bishop. So I'm going to take that knight off and get rid of that knight with a definite idea in mind. And the definite idea is to now increase pressure in the center with d4. And here we have one more move, queen e6 played, attacking that knight. And what Pragg is trying to tempt Fabiano into doing, he would love it if white now closes with d5. This would be a positional mistake. It's the kind of move that you could be tempted to play, but actually now black would be very happy because all of a sudden the bishop has that free range and you gain control of the c5 square forever. So white doesn't want to push this pawn because at the moment it controls that square, it controls the bishop. So you have to defend the knight. So you just move the queen up to d3, keeping everything contained in the middle. This is our current situation. It looks like Fabiano is out of his preparation now. The same can be said for Pragg. It looks fairly even, but white has made progress in the center and on the queen side now, Tanya. So I would probably pick white if I had to pick a preferable side here.
Yeah, I hear you, Simon, and I think I agree with almost everything that you just said. I also feel that white has got this long-term control over these light squares of d5 and f5 after the light square bishops are off the board, and we can often see a knight rerouting there. These kind of positions are a lot about getting pawn breaks for black to equalize because you eventually end up running out of space. So the two pawn breaks that are usually in the air is f5 and d5. But right now, with the rook lined up against black's queen, it's hard to imagine that working out with this e5 weakness. Meanwhile, for white, I think it's easy to imagine improvement on the queen side. b6 isn't possible right now. White having two defenders, black having three pieces defending the b6 square, then maybe white can start thinking about advancing the a pawn. The move a5 comes to mind. You're already threatening b6, and if black was to trade on b5, white ends up creating a weakness for black on b7 after recapturing with the rook and taking control of the b line. And I see that Fabi has gotten up after making the move queen d3. So it's still Pragg's turn. He hasn't yet taken a decision. So white has an idea of playing a5. Meanwhile, black has to find a way to free up his position, trying to get a central break. And it's hard for me to think how Pragg can manage to do that. Give white one more move, and I really start preferring white after a5.
I agree. And you need to have counterplay when you're playing someone as good as Fabiano. When, especially, it goes back to that thing we were talking about earlier, when even if the position was even, or roughly even, as this position you could say is, there's not really any big weaknesses for either side. It's who has the easier plan. And Tanya, you just pointed out a number of good white plans there. a5, threatening b6, simple and good. I also like your idea of maybe rerouting this knight. You could go here, come into the center, or redirect towards the king side. These are easy to play plans for white, but we're looking at black's plans. What can black do? Black can't really ever play one of his pawn breaks because you mentioned the opening of the e-file. So it's hard to find a plan for Pragg. And I think this is why Pragg is spending a bit more time here, because what does he actually play in this position? And I don't know. I'll be honest. I mean, I'm thinking maybe c6, but that could really backfire. Does he prepare things of rook b8 to guard b7? But then I'll be worried about losing my bishop. if I go rook b8, because this would trap the bishop. Do I even try to exchange some piece off when knight b6? But that doesn't look right either. So it's a big decision for Pragg here, and Pragg naturally using his time to try to get out of, I think, some small problems here, actually. Black has some issues. It's not easy to play this position. Okay, he's gone rook b8. He's preparing himself to defend b7 and preparing himself to just defend that file in general here. So a sensible move there. If a5 is played, this is the first thing you have to think about. a5, I think Black now has to take on b5, because b6 is a serious threat here. And you could get some position like this with rook takes b5, when I'd imagine Black now plays c6. The rook comes back, I don't know where, let's say b2. And if White is able to play rook b1, it could be a little bit difficult, but maybe Black can get rid of more pawns of b6 here, or even b5. So this could be Pragg's idea. Just try to basically exchange off all the weaknesses you have. This is an ideal situation for Pragg. Let's say things get exchanged here, and then you don't have anything else to worry about on the queen side in a position like this. Even here, I prefer White a little bit, though, because of the center and natural moves to attack. I think a little bit better for White, this position, is fair to be said here.
A really nice prophylactic move by Pragg here. Some super GM stuff. Rook to b8, just preempting all of White's idea, but that shows the kind of mode that Pragg is in now. He needs to just stabilize the position. He realizes that he doesn't have any pawn breaks of his own. He needs to take care of White's ideas. And as long as he's able to do that, he keeps the balance, because Black doesn't have any weaknesses yet. As long as there are no glaring weaknesses in Black's position, the pawn structure, you're fine. But as we've been pointing out, it looks like Fabi's the one who can try and create something here, and Pragg will have to be precise over the next few moves to neutralize Fabi's initiative on the queen side in this position. Simon, should we bring up our bird's eye view and take a look at what is going on in the action all around? Today, I think, is the first day that the playing venue, the playing hall, has actually been opened up to live audience, to live viewers. So it's really cool to see how many locals and people from Azerbaijan, kids, older generation, everyone shown up for the action, the big matchups that are happening at the Marriott Boulevard today. And this is what we have across boards. We see an endgame in the Goryachkina Salimova board. Queens have been traded off. It's equal number of pawns. And I think it does look like this game is rather peaceful right now. And this could end in a draw. Meanwhile, the Muzichuk-Tanzangi game, it's still developing, the isolated queen's pawn. We checked in a long time ago. And Simon, it feels like just one move has been played since then.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the Muzichuk game against Tan, nothing's really happened there at all. I think they've both castled and then they've gone back to have a little rest again. So there's not more of an update we can give there. We will, of course, have a look at it, but they're moving quite slowly there in a pretty logical position. So I guess we should get up to date with this interesting game between Aleksandra and Salimova, which had some points earlier on, which we were trying to work out, so we could dive over there straight away. But like you mentioned, the playing hall. I always love chess events, Tanya, in where chess is popular for a country like Azerbaijan, when you have such a range of spectators. Right, we saw a young kid there earlier on, kind of engrossed. He must have only been about 8 years old, but then you get 80-year-olds who have that much interest, and the same goes for playing. Right, when you play chess, it's one of the only kind of sports games where you can get an 8-year-old versus a 90-year-old, and they can play on pretty much an equal surface. And I love that about chess. It's great for bridging those gaps.
I fully agree. But the one thing that you don't want to do today in the chess world is play against any 18-year-old, because they're just crushing the field everywhere that they play. We see these youngsters. It really does feel like a new era of chess with a sort of a change of guards that we are seeing. across events, and these youngsters, these teenagers really holding their own against the world's elite. It's one of those when your idols become your rivals kind of scenarios.
Yeah, I agree, Tanya. I mean, if I was a tournament organizer, I might be a really grumpy one. And I'd be like, this tournament is only open to players like 20 years and older. Actually, let's make it 25. Yeah, I'm not quite veteran age yet, but I don't want any prodigies playing in this tournament because they're just so underrated. And this is happening all around the world now. And I think it's about younger players. They're just able to absorb so much information so quickly. And I have to say, I feel like a bit of an old man when I play chess nowadays, Tanya. It's a bit bad. I don't know what happened. The years, they just faded away. And now I'm just an old, wrinkled old chess player. Yes, it's sad.
You're making
sad
me feel bad. I'm in the exact same board. Sign me up for that 25 and above tournament that you're planning, Simon.
Yeah.
I'll be there. I'll show up for that one. But I completely agree. Playing with the younger generation right now, it is brutal. They know their theory so well. They just go for the most attacking, aggressive ideas. They don't fear if you're higher rated than them. And in most cases, they are. Their strength is a lot higher than their rating. And it's just a nightmare. Well, right now, we've got this position up in front of us. A lot of moves have happened since. So Goryachkina did pick up the pawn, and I believe we did see a trade of queens. And I'm just wondering, how did Salimova end up regaining that pawn?
Yeah, so well, let's have a look here. I mean, an interesting fact actually that neither of these players would be able to play in our competition, Tanya.
Oh, yay!
So they're both too young, so we wouldn't have to worry about either of these prodigies defeating us because they're just too young.
So we'll
over 25 competition.
Yeah, I mean, we'll only have Magnus playing, Fabi playing, the older lot, so we got nothing to worry.
They're not even scary anymore. It's the younger ones I'll be scared about, the ones who are, barely see the board over the table. And, well, back to this game. Now Black, Salimova played a very interesting move, c5. Now, just turn the computer off for a second. I don't know how to get rid of that horrible red mark there, because when I first saw this move c5, I was like, that's really clever. I was like, that's a really nice idea. Why is it a nice idea? Well, the point is, we've mentioned white's behind development. You got the two bishops. You want to open up the position. You want to play, I call this a lever move. You're levering the position open. I'll even do the little, that's not a lever, that's more of a shovel, but you kind of get the idea. I'm levering my shovel to open up the position. And it just seems like a very natural move. I actually really like this move. And, if the queen takes that pawn again, there could be a rook coming in. Maybe white could have played this. Maybe white should have played this, but you're getting a lot of tempo. And the computer indicates that this was the move white should have played. But even though white's two pawns, it looks really scary. Maybe I can try sacrificing on d4 here. Something like this. This is typical kind of Salimova play. She's a really talented, brilliant attacker. And with rook c8 coming, I would like to be black here. I mean, I'm a bit of a chess cowboy, really. I like, I love getting the initiative, and this is the kind of position. Even though the computer says white's winning, I'd rather be black here, Tanya. Had this happened.
I fully agree with you. I mean, you want to be the side that has full development, the bishop pair, white's king still in the center. And the thing with computer loving queen c5 is that, the engines, they are super greedy and they have the ability to just grab a pawn and then defend it to perfection and be better. But from a human perspective, to defend these kind of positions is so much harder, which is why following an engine or analyzing with the engine is kind of counterproductive in these positions, because it's not the human approach here. For all of us, if we take the c5 pawn, we'll probably end up getting checkmated in the next 10 moves.
Definitely.
But the engine plays the best move after move, defends against any attack, and just ends up being materially up. But one can understand why Goryachkina would not even dream or dare of picking up the c5 pawn. They just say, you know what, I want to get the queens off the board. My king is uncastled. My piece is on the king side. Not a single piece is moved. I want to neutralize the tension on the board and get as many pieces off it as possible. Queen d8, a very understandable move, and another example of that you just take the cross and chuck it out of the window.
I agree, 100%. This is a much more human move. I think most players would be tempted to do this. I mean, we talk about, the computer's play and what the computer says. But I mean, I'm just thinking of one ex-world champion, Mikhail Tau, and not most of his moves, but a lot of his moves would be double dubious moves if you put it on the computer. But they were brilliantly creative ideas that caused his opponent so many problems, and they made him become world champion. You know, if you put him on a computer now, they'd be like, you can't play like this. But you know, you can play computer bad moves sometimes to get the advantage. It's very strange. Okay, we'll get up.
Yeah, I think Tal is a fantastic example of what you just said. If you put in his games with a modern engine right now, every move or every one of those beautiful sacrifices would get a lot of red on the board, a lot of red marks on the board. But the only red that Tal actually has in the world is all the hearts. And that's simply because his play was so magnificent for the time that it was in, and so creative. And for a human to handle and to respond to that, to defend at that level, is extremely difficult. While a computer, of course, can take it and refute every sacrifice. So I really like c5. And I think it's a very natural move. You're down a pawn, you've got a bishop pair, you want to open up the game. c5, a nice response. And for Goryachkina to trade off the queens, very understandable.
Yeah, I agree. And well, we'll come back to this game in a second. I think we're going to sort of come to a break now, very quick break. The positions are heating up now, Tanya, aren't they? They're all getting to the middle game scenarios. And this is where the action is going to commence, really, the main action. They're out of theory now.
And this is the finals of the FIDE Women World Cup as Aleksandra Goryachkina fights against Salimova. This is her second final in 2021. She did lose to Aleksandra Goryachkina. Can she win the World Cup this time? Salimova has been on fire from the start, and we've got a huge crowd, a house full, supporting their local hero. And we will be back with the action from the Magnus Carlsen Abasov game, which is absolute fire. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with World Cup action in just a few.
Chess Kid is fun. Chess is great for the brain, but it's also fun to play. And Chess Kid makes it easy to have fun. Whether your child is a total beginner or a prodigy, they can hop on and find a well-matched opponent from around the world at any time. Chess Kid is the safe, parent-approved way for your child to play chess online. Chess Kid is educational. To kids, it feels just like playing, but chess is a great way to learn patience, strategy, and critical thinking. Chess Kid features a comprehensive training program that guides kids to level up on their way to mastery. There are more than 50,000 chess puzzles and a whole library of entertaining videos that teach strategies, tactics, openings, and endgames specifically for kids. Chess Kid is easy. Whether you're a parent helping your child, a coach managing dozens of kids, or a school of hundreds. Signing up is free and easy, so what are you waiting for?
Chess.com's game review recently got a major update. Here are 4 key notes. At the end of each game review, you will now see a summary of the game from your coach, your performance rating for that game, and a quick grade for you and your opponent in the opening, middle game, and end game. We've added a new classification called Miss for when a move fails to take advantage of an opportunity, but it is otherwise a sound move. We've also changed the definition of blunder. Now a move will only be considered a blunder if it loses material or allows a checkmate. Coach will now draw arrows and highlight squares when you hover over or click on the highlighted words in the move explanations. This should make move explanations easier to follow. Finally, Coach's explanations will now reference specific pieces and threats in the explanations, making move explanations much more intuitive. The new game review experience is available on chess.com right now.
"309 players, 206 men and 103 women are here for the 2023 FIDE World Cup. It's the premier knockout tournament in over-the-board chess. All of these players have one goal: to become a candidate for the World Championship. Only 3 players in each tournament will earn this distinction. The winners will also earn a combined 160 grand in US dollars. Not bad. The top remaining seeds in 2023 are Magnus Carlsen and Aleksandra Goryachkina. Neither of them have won a World Cup before. Yes, even Magnus has yet to make it past the semis. It's that tough of a tournament. Still, Carlsen is the favorite in pretty much any tournament he plays. But don't sleep on the rest of this field. Caruana, Pragg, they're all here to try and win their first World Cup. For its part, the women's field also boasts some of the strongest players in the world. Who will take the throne this year? In a knockout like this, it is truly anyone's game. Who will come out on top? Who else will qualify for the candidates? What upsets are in store? This is the 2023 FIDE World Cup.
And we're back. We're live from Baku, and a huge crowd there at the Marriott Boulevard FIDE World Cup playing hall. And right now they have one big hero they're rooting for, Nejat Abasov, playing against world number one. But that hasn't been the only standout story from Baku. It's also been Nurgul Salimova, who's having the tournament of her life. She is in the finals playing against Aleksandra Goryachkina, already booked her spot into the 2024 candidates, and winning the finals would confirm her grandmaster title. A lot to fight for. She's been phenomenal so far, playing aggressive, attacking chess, even in this game with the black pieces, not shying away from trying to get the initiative for material, but Goryachkina keeping everything under control. The queens have been traded off. We see rook on d8. The more I see this position, I feel like the pawn sacrifice for Salimova is paying off. There is pressure on the d4 pawn, but I believe moves have happened, Simon. Let's get up to date with our live board.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way Black's... I love the way that Salimova has been playing throughout this competition. He's playing very exciting chess, very aggressive chess, very energetic chess. And she's continuing in this game in the same way. And I think Goryachkina is basically done something very sensible in a dangerous position where she could start grabbing another pawn. Let's say she could have taken here, but after something like knight d7, I think it'll be clear very quickly that Black has lots of compensation and the kind of position you could easily lose as White, actually. White's done something very sensible. White's like, right, I'm going to give the pawn back. I'm going to play d5. And if you do capture the pawn back, which Black decides to do, the knight's defending that pawn. So Black gets rid of the knight and takes on d5. I'm just going to stabilize the position. I'm going to take out a lot of sting that you have. So Salimova's won the pawn back. But after a couple of moves, knight e2, the knight coming maybe to f4, it does seem that White is very safe here. So probably roughly even, but let's continue with the way the game goes. Rook d6, avoiding a knight jump. And now rook d1, initiating more exchanges. Black continues her development. The king gets out of the way of a check. The rook comes there anyway. This knight finds that very nice square. Black might as well keep the strong bishop. White now just continuing developing. G5 gaining space and knight h5 on the board. And this is the current position, Tanya. What do we reckon? I mean, if you had to pick a side, Tanya, would you rather be White or Black in this position?
I would pick Black here. And I see that it's an even position, but Black just has that slightly better pawn structure. If we talk about pawn islands, White has got 3 pawn islands, Black has got 2 pawn islands. Black's the one who currently has control of the only open file in the position. So White will probably end up offering a trade there to neutralize that. I'm not loving This knight on h5, I'm not sure where it's headed. You could give a check on f6, but black just steps up with the king, and it's not very clear what the knight is doing there. Meanwhile, black's knight can enter the center of the board. A move like knight e5 comes to mind. You're already threatening checks on d3. Potentially, the bishop from f5 can fall back to e6, hitting that pawn on a2, targeting that c4 square along with combining the knight and the bishop. It just feels like there's more harmony in black's position, less weakness. It's still a very even game, but if I had to pick a color to play here, I would pick black. What about you, Sai?
Again, everything you said there, 100% agree. I think black has some small advantage here. Black has the better pawn structure. These are stragglers. They're kind of like, not able to defend each other. They're weak. They're isolated. And black's pieces seem to be a little bit better. You mentioned the idea of this knight potentially coming into one of these two squares. I love that plan. It's not obviously that bad for white. These are really the only weaknesses I can see in white's position, and a draw is probably reasonably likely here. But it's just more comfortable for black to play. Black has a time advantage as well, and the risky play from Salimova has paid off, I think, very well to get this position with black. I like your move knight e5. This looks like a very natural move to play. Because you're just creating some, very easy moves like knight d3 check, or your bishop e6, bishop c4 idea was really, really clever if you can get that in. Because if you can get rid of the bishops, this is something you should always think of. When you're playing positions, a good little tip for everyone out there, what sets of pieces would help your position if you can exchange them off, and what sets of pieces, if you exchange them off, will make your position worse. And if you just removed the bishops, these squares here would become really, really nice for the knight, and white would not be able to remove that knight anymore. So this idea of either going bishop c4, or why not bishop d3, maybe in some cases you could play this as long as you avoid the pin. I think black has the better chances. Do we have any more moves?
We do. She's gone for knight e5. It's on the board, and I think it's really showing that Salimova had that prep in. She managed to get Goryachkina in unfamiliar territory. And the last few moves that we've seen by white in this game, by Goryachkina, it feels like she wants to bail out. She just wants this game to end in a draw and to move on to the second game. The queen trade, the giving up the pawn to complete development, they all sort of signal that she realizes the dangers in this position that do exist. And a draw would be a happy result for white. It feels also like the most likely result, but Salimova here trying to get that little edge into the endgame. Let's pull up our bird's eye view and get a full look at all the action all around. There's also a huge fight for the third place in the FIDE Women World Cup on that rightmost board between Anna Muzychuk and Tan Zhongyi. And a pawn has been picked up. White, at least for now, has an extra pawn. I do see the black bishop is threatening to take the pawn on b2. White has captured a central pawn. So it, again, feels like it's going to be an even battle once black is able to recapture the pawn on b2. But meanwhile, it's heavy action in the open. And Simon, both positions looking equally spicy. Where do you want to go to?
I don't mind. I mean, like they are looking spicy. I guess we could go back to Magnus Carlsen, just see how things have developed there. Did I hear another siren in the background there, Tanya? Was that you? It sounds like a very dangerous place where you live. All these sirens coming through the ghetto. So
I think it's just support for the kind of chess that we're seeing. I mean, this position as well, it deserves a siren of its own. I mean, black has taken a decision to trade off on h4, further weakening the pawn structure. But Abasov's style is so concrete that I think it's of little value. If he finds his play and his dynamic approach in the position, he's happy to go for that. And Simon, do you see that similarity in Salimova's play as well?
Yeah, I think generally one of the things I've noticed being like an old chess grandmaster nowadays is that
you're not an old chess grandmaster. You're just an old chess grandmaster. Older. I'll say older. I'm not old yet. Can't quite get in the veterans, but one thing I've noticed though in the last 10 years is just how the players now
They're using computers a lot more, and they're playing what, to my eyes, look like ugly moves, right? I mean, if we look at this position, ugly pawn structures. I mean, the way Black's played the opening, it looks visually ugly, yet a lot of players, they don't care about how it looks visually. They've got concrete reasons for doing these things, like tactical ideas that the computer has maybe trained them to play like, you know. Yeah, and I've sort of noticed that a lot more in youngsters play, that they're playing visually sort of strange ideas, but ideas that work. They just simply work because of tactics. And I think this has been a big shift, especially in the last 50 years, how chess is developing now. Just concrete chess. And Abasov with the black pieces is a concrete player. And we can see, let's get to the current position, the way the game goes. He just moves his queen to a solid square. Magnus moves his knight into the center. And again, the next move, to my eyes, Tanya, looks ugly, right? I don't think I'd play this move. I don't know what I would play. I might just go into defensive mode here. But he's got this quite nice formation of pawns, and he decides to sort of separate them and open up the H-file. Now, you can't really take the rook here because there could be an F5 move, unleashing the bishop on the rook. But after knight takes, you know, it seems like, again, Black has made a sort of positionally weakening idea, but he's going for a concrete concept activity, just trying to get some targets to attack, trying to find that activity, that tactical play in the position with a rook move here, rook g8. And this is where we stand. Black does have that extra pawn still in the position, but white structure a lot better compared to black structure. Normally a kind of position that Magnus would like thrive in, I feel, Tanya, here. But what should he do next in this position?
And I think that's the key point, because these last few moves that Abasov has played, and I saw that feature chat saying that Abasov should have kept the king side closed, and I think that's a decision that most of us would have taken. But there is indeed a very direct, straightforward idea that Nejat has. With this last move, he's tied down Magnus's knight on h4. Notice how that knight actually cannot come back into the game. You can't really go to f3 with g4 being weak. The tactics don't really work out. After knight f3, you can take on g4, knight e5, you've got your own knight. Perhaps coming into e5, it gets a bit messy, and I'm not really sure. But knight f3 would be a move that you're not really comfortable making. And it's the same with the move knight g2, knight e3. If that knight can land on e3, you'd be happy. But knight g2 runs into potential moves like f5, taking advantage of that pin along the g line. There's always the idea that Black has of actually breaking through with f5 on the board at the right moment, when, of course, everything is safe and it works out. And it might even be a threat at this point that Black wants to get f5 and create his own activity, which means that Magnus has to take care of this g4 pawn weakness, as well as these direct threats that Black has. Strategically, I think white almost looks winning with this horrible pawn structure that Black has on both sides of the board. But there are these direct lines and these direct problems doubling up on the G line, a potential f5 break, white's knight stuck on h4, white's queen stuck defending the g4 pawn. That doesn't make the picture as clear as white would want here.
Yeah, I agree. I think Black's doing the right thing. Black's trying to get some activity. And, you know, this f5 move would be a move that Black would love to be able to play. I mean, it's still quite passive for Black, I think, this position. I think f5 can be controlled by white. Maybe white could even just play queen f3 or something like that. But in general, I think Abasov is doing a good job with his position, considering how the opening went. I mean, it looked a lot worse than this. He's got this pawn structure, which is better than it could be. We were looking at structures where that pawn was separated, and this gives Black much better control of the center. And Magnus has still got some job to do here to get anything substantial out of this position, any substantial advantage. And again, you should always think about plans when you've got a position. Who's got the easier plans? And this is a tough position. There's nothing obvious for either side. Yeah, f5 would be nice, but it's very hard to play. You know, I'm always taking there. Look at pawn breaks. When you've got a position, you look at putting your pieces on the best squares, and then you look at what pawn breaks you have, because pawn breaks change the nature of the game, and also you want to change the nature of the game into your favor. But but it doesn't seem like either side has any obvious pawn breaks at all. So it's a tough position to play, this one, Tanya, I think, here for both sides.
And we keep pointing out Black's really destroyed pawn structure. But there is another very big problem with Abasov's position, and that is the light squared bishop. The bishop on a6 is not only clamped down by White's pawn chain and the light square pawns that you're highlighting right now, but his own pawns of c6 and e6. What Black would love to do is pick up that c6 pawn and chuck it out of the board to open up a diagonal for that bishop. But that would be illegal, not allowed, Simon. So that bishop on a6, it just feels like you're playing without a piece right now. Can Magnus improve further? You were talking about pawn breaks, and as you mentioned it, it's on the board. I was just about to say the same thing, that does Magnus have the time and the opportunity to actually break in the center immediately with the move f4? He answers the question, and the whole point is that f4 can be picked up, but at the cost of Black's f6 pawn. And we can perhaps show this, that if Black was to capture with e takes f6, you can pick it up with your knight on e4. Knight f6 is the move that comes to my mind. And now you can really see the e6 pawn being super weak, the f4 pawn being weak, the rook on g8 hanging, and it just feels like Black's position would fall apart.
Agreed. Yeah, very nice idea, and well spotted as well. I mean, this kind of position, it suddenly has there's many threats here. White's ready to pick up another pawn. White's piece is flying in, and if that pawn goes, the white knights are going to dominate. They're both going to come into the center, and this bishop, another good observation. It's not taking part in the battle. So f4 is a very concrete idea, and it's a very nice idea. Black now has this situation where, okay, you either take that pawn. If you don't take that pawn, I think there's a big positional threat, Tanya. Let's just say you play king b8, for example. I think Magnus could be simply playing f5 here. And this is the kind of move which would stabilize both of the white knights on great squares. You've got to, as Black now, at some point, allow the exchange of these two pawns, because White's going to take on e6. And as soon as this pawn is taken, I would gravitate to taking with the knight here. Just look at those fantastic knights here. The knights are attacking so many points. Black's bishops, you mentioned the light square bishop, the dark square bishop, you might as well knock that off the board, right? That's horrible, right? Just look at it. It's stuck by its own pawns, and really unpleasant. And I see we have another legend in the chat, Tanya, a real legend of the game here. So we better say hello and to Yasser, who is in the chat, right? And hello, Yasser.
You shout out to Grandmaster Yas in the chat, and he's got some ideas for us. And I never thought that Yas would talk about getting rid of a pawn. He is the ultimate pawn grabber, but even he says, Simon, that it would be a dream for Black to get rid of that e6 pawn to activate the bishop. We were talking about get rid of that c6 pawn. Yas has another plan. Move the king to b8, fall back with your bishop to c8, and get f5 in. f5 is something that we did speak about as a potential that Black has, but it just feels with Magnus's direct approach of f4, Black might not have enough time to do it, because if you play Yasser's idea of king to b8, then f5. I love that move. It just feels like a huge positional win for White to really take away all activity from Black's bishops, and there's just no way you want to allow that. Yes, you are a young legend, and as we're talking, Abasov says no f5 on the board. He grabs Magnus's f4 pawn. But this just means that we get the position with the trade of the f6 pawn where Black has so many problems to solve in the very next move.
Yes, I mean, the knight takes f6 looks like the obvious follow-up here. But I can totally understand why Abasov played this move. I mean, I think the prospect of Magnus playing f5 against you and gaining a bind on the position forever. I mean, the interesting thing is after f5, I think knight takes is the obvious move, but pawn takes might also be good, because this really does stop both bishops ever coming in. With a knight on f5, you can see that bishop being able to swap itself off, but these are killed now. And I just think this position is revolting, is the only word I can think of for Black. So as a human idea, taking on f4 seems to be the right approach, at least getting some complications. It's Magnus to now move. He has a bit of a time advantage, and I wonder what is happening after knight takes f6. It's got to be knight takes f6 here, right?
I love it.
This has to be the move, and I feel that I mean, this could be a bit of a forcing line, Tanya, because you probably have to take the knight now. Otherwise, the queen is coming in here, and there's all sorts of problems going on. That knight is too strong. Why not get rid of your bad bishop, take the knight? White now has a bit of a mini decision to make. Queen takes e6, check, feels the most natural. So let's just go down this line a little bit further. And I don't think it really matters what black plays. Let's say he puts the king on b8. And now we want to win our piece back. Let's avoid any rook e8 ideas. So we can evaluate the position after something like queen takes f6. And maybe we'll put one more move on the board here. Let's grab that pawn there, keeping... I think it's a pawn advantage. I'm kind of losing count now. It's a pawn advantage of black. And this could be a critical position, Tanya, to assess who's doing well here. Interesting position. Pieces everywhere now.
Pieces everywhere, and it's easy to kind of forget that black has an extra pawn, and it's because of the pawn structure that you have. It's still a pretty hideous one with 4 pawn islands, a double pawns on the c line, an f4 weakness, an h6 weakness. The first move that comes to mind in such kind of positions for me would be jump in with that knight to h4, bring that knight into the game. Knight f5 ideas in the air right now, which do look pretty strong to me, and creating a lot of threats on the board. But Simon, we might be headed down this path, because after taking on f4, Magnus has slowed down, but I think knight f6 is not the move that he's thinking about. But he is, I'm still looking at Yas. He's saying structure. What structure? That is hideous. I couldn't agree more with you. Yas, I know you love your pawns, but in this positions, in this kind of a position, you just can't like black's position too much, despite that extra pawn. It's hard to see that pawn advantage here.
I think in Yasser we trust, Tanya, definitely. And I think we're with Yasser here that the black's position, it looks really, I don't know if it's an expression, I'll cut ropey. It looks really dodgy. It's going to fall apart at any moment here with all these weaknesses. But I mean, this seems like a key line, I think, as well. I mean, you mentioned the knight going to f5. I'm also wondering, the knight on f7 is a very good defender. It defends a lot of squares. Could we also try to move the knight, I don't know, to g6 or f3 and just try to get it to e5? Just try to get rid of that knight? It's another idea when we're going to get our pawn back and maybe pick up some other pawns, maybe get the bishop in. So this is
really nice.
Yeah, I mean, this knight has many quite decent ways to reroute itself into the game.
I like it. You retreat to go forward. Knight f3, knight e5, or knight g, maybe not knight g6. It just feels a bit loose there. Yeah, but knight f3, knight e5 makes a lot of sense. And I think Magnus right now is not really thinking about an alternative to knight f6, but kind of evaluating this final position, which almost seems like a forced sequence of moves following the capture on f6.
Agreed. Yeah, I think he's just thinking about how is it going to turn out after knight takes f6. And that last line looked fairly forced. I mean, there was another idea there. After bishop takes f6, queen takes pawn looks very logical, but I mean, why not win that pawn? I don't see any reason not to. But you could maybe play this way. Is there any difference here when, let's assume the rook moves to defend that weak pawn, and now the difference to the last position is you keep both these pawns on. I think I prefer the last position to this.
Yeah,
just for the fact that what. Yeah.
I would channel my inner Yas and go pawn hunting. You would want to take up that e6 pawn, get your queen on f6, and it feels like a nice position for white.
It does. So we're expecting knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes e6, the king moving, taking here. Potentially black has other options, but it looks logical to grab a pawn in this position because white's play is probably going to be the same anyway. White's going to use his knight on the rim and bring it back. And Magnus has now played knight takes f6. I mean, the question does remain, how bad is black's position after this sequence of moves? It does look bad. Is it holdable? It's not that bad, as in black's got some horrible pawns. I mean, you don't really want to be playing Magnus in such a position. Magnus loves playing against horrible pawns.
Honestly, really when you're playing against Magnus and you have to evaluate a position as not that bad, that's bad news.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, how do you play against Magnus? It's very, very tough. But if you're worse against him and your structure's bad, it's not good. He's one of the best players at converting little edges like this. But I'm fully expecting this position to come on the board. And I think in a minute we can go to the bird's eye view and just check out the other games, as this one will develop, and we'll see how things could change. I mean, okay, just before we go to the bird's eye view, let's just have a look at rook takes g4. Just one more thing, and as Yasser suggesting this one as well, Yasser also likes